Hello everyone and welcome back to Siddle's Podcast, and today I want to talk to you about all the books that I read in August. Or well, to be precise, this is going to be part 2 of my August wrap-up because I've noticed that I usually read way too many books to talk about them adequately in a video that is not like an hour and a half long, and I really don't want to do that to you guys. So if you want to check out part 1, it will be linked in the description and also up above here. But this is essentially going to be about all the books that I read in like aroundish the second half of August, more or less. Some of them I have with me physically, some I don't, and for some of them I do want to make like actual reviews. So whenever I add those, I will also try and leave them in this video somewhere in the description, in the info cards, the usual. So, first things first, we're gonna look at my Storygraph stats to see how I did this month already. Quick disclaimer, I do have, I think, 2 days left of August as of right now, and to anyone who knows me, I read very fast, so the likelihood that there is going to be at least 1, if not 2 more books added to this list is pretty high, but so far in August I have read a total of 17 books, with 6,620 pages, and I've also listened to 15.82 hours of audiobooks. Storygraph is very precise when it comes to that. 40% of the books that I've finished this month have been over 500 pages, so that's pretty neat. All of the audiobooks that I've listened to were between 8 and, what does Storygraph say? 15 hours and 59 minutes. So aroundish that time, I do believe that both were like 11 and 12 hours respectively, if I remember correctly. I've only read fiction books this month, to no one's surprise, and my biggest genre was fantasy, somewhat closely followed by the LGBTQIA+ tag that Storygraph usually has. Again, I'm not exactly surprised. I read basically every single book, or every single book I finished, I did in printed format. And again, my 2 audiobooks are obviously added to that, and almost every single book I finished was actually in English. I do believe there's 1 book, to be precise, that I read in German and that I finished in German. Well, actually it should be 2. 1 or 2, something along those lines. And I had an average star rating of 4.21 so far, so honestly, pretty good month. I'm not too mad about this. So, first things first, let's talk about the books that I'm still in the middle of, or that I still plan on trying to finish this month to the best of my abilities. So first off, we have an ebook that I'm still finishing. It's actually an ARC that I got from the author. Much thanks to Morgan for doing that for me. I do plan on uploading a review in September. And that would be Providence Girls, as I said, by Morgan Dante. This is a sapphic, I believe it's set in the 20th century roundabout-ish, story, and it was blurbed to me mostly in reference to Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, which is one of my favorite books of all times. It's very much slow gothic horror. One of them is turning into a monster, a monster of the deep kind of vibes. And so far it's basically just 2 characters talking to each other through letters and or notebooks, like diary entries that they leave for each other. So far, the only interaction we've seen between the 2 characters has been in recollection of both of them talking about their memories, which I think is really interesting. I'm really intrigued to see where this is going. I'm about 20% in right now, so super excited to continue with that. And the other one that I'm currently reading is this one. It's a German translation of a Russian fantasy novel. In German it's called The Stranger, and the series is called The Echo Labyrinth by Max Frei, who is also the main character of the series, and we basically follow a normal guy who gets kind of like yeeted into the Echo world, and he becomes like a magical cop in a way. Think Ben Aronovich Rivers of London, but somehow even bizarrer than that, to be quite honest. It's basically 4 short-ish stories of each about 100 pages. Each of them has their own separate plot, and the only thing that is kind of like recurring throughout them are different characters. Obviously Max is still the main character in all of them. And I'm currently like in the middle of the 3rd story, which was called Cell Number 5. So there's that. It's really funny in between, like it has this sort of like almost dry humor that makes you read a sentence and go like, I'm not entirely sure if you meant this like literally or not, and I feel like you didn't. So I'm enjoying myself. It's really fun. It's a nice read in between. I do read it very fast because it's in German, and I usually read German books even faster than I read English books, so you know. It's really nice if you're sitting in the train and you have like 20 minutes or something, you can just bust out a few pages and it's great. So I will be continuing this, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to finish this in August. Right, there's a few books that I also don't have with me physically that I nonetheless read, and that would be because all 3 of them are books that I either borrowed from Sarah and then gave back to her, or that I read when I was at her place. Hi Sarah! So the first one of these that I finished first, I think I finished it very, very shortly before I went to her place actually, and that was The Dragon of Jinsayeng by K.S. Veloso, which is the last book in the Chronicles of the Bitch Queen. It's a trilogy, it's high fantasy, and we basically follow Talion, who is a queen. She's also called the Wolf of Oroñaro, or well, the wolf pub of the Wolf of Oroñaro, basically. It's a long story. And we follow her throughout her life, and mostly through death and destruction, and so on. And I have a bit of a complicated relationship with the series. I can't entirely put my finger on as to how exactly that is so complicated. I personally think the first-person perspective of the book didn't exactly do it a lot of favors. I think that is where most of my issues actually came from, as well as the fact that some of the characterization felt very vague to me in ways that I don't think it was supposed to be, because overall I found these storylines, specifically surrounding Talion, or Tali as she's usually called by a lot of other people, specifically those that really care for her, I found it to be very interesting because it doesn't follow the quote-unquote usual storyline of like a woman clawing her way to power or whatever. It seems almost the opposite, because the book reminds you over and over again that she actually doesn't have that much power in her country despite being a queen. And I found that very interesting, especially in the last book. I think The Dragon of Jinsayeng was actually my favorite of the bunch. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around why it didn't work as much as I wanted it to. I feel like there was also some disconnect between how the characters were supposed to be portrayed versus how they, you know, arrived with me, how I thought about them, and I wasn't the biggest fan of that. I think overall I would give my experience of the series like a rounded up 4-star experience, I'd say. So do check it out if you want to read about, you know, high fantasy written by women with female protagonists, specifically female protagonists that are not like 16 or 17, so that's also nice. And see if you like it more than I do, or if you can pinpoint why exactly I might not have liked it as much as I wanted to. I'm begging you. It's really hard to grasp the concept of it was fine, but there was something missing and I couldn't tell you what if you threatened my life. Anyway, moving on from that experience, we come to a duology that I enjoyed a lot more from page 1 up until the last page, and that would be The Forever Sea and The Endless Song by Joshua Philip Johnson. As I said, this is a high fantasy duology, and I loved it. The writing style was exactly up my alley. Really enjoyed that. Absolutely loved the way that he kept on describing things. It was just chef's kiss. And I found the world building to be super interesting because essentially the Forever Sea is not a sea as we would imagine it with water, but it's plants. And for some reason ships can swim on that. I don't even know if you should call it swim. They're just on the plants. The plants are everything. And we follow a lot of characters, and specifically in the first book we follow a hearth keeper who is tasked with like keeping the hearth fire alive that actually allows these ships to progress in the speed that they want to. But outside of that framed story of the experiences that she goes through, we have a framing story where a being, a person, we're not entirely sure what exactly he is, he's just called the storyteller, and he's actually telling this story to other people. And I think one of the most interesting parts about the entire book series was the fact that the disconnect of like emotional levels of intentions that we have between the framing story and the framed story are so vastly different, because the framed story is very much just like adventures, and like, yes, there's horrible things happening, but it's just adventure time. It's fun. It gives you like slight piracy vibes, I guess, and like, you know, going on an adventure, driving your ship into who knows where and experiencing who knows what. And the framing story is so creepy. Like, there is something outside of the village where the storykeeper is telling his story and no one knows what, and he's the only one who knows that it's coming, and he doesn't explain anything to you. He just keeps on going with the story, and you're just like, well, what's happening with you? This is very scary. Can you please tell me something about this? I really, really enjoyed that disconnect between the two, like the intentional disconnect between the two story parts. It was amazing. I highly recommend the series. It was a lot of fun. I really loved reading it, and I did tear up at the end of it because it was done so well. Loved it. Thank you very much for this gift, Joshua Philip Johnson. That was everything I wanted. Thank you so much. Right, I'm thinking with which one to continue, and you know what, we're just gonna get it out of the way. I read Fourth Wing. I hated it. I gave it 1 star. I'm not gonna talk about this in depth because I did film a RAM review of it, and it's going up at some point, maybe slightly after this video, I don't know yet. The writing was immature and horrible. The characters were incredibly boring and had, they were not even two-dimensional, they felt one-dimensional most of the time. I was just not connecting with the story on any levels whatsoever. The world building was lazy, and the presentation of the world building was even worse than lazy. It felt like, it's just... Yeah, I only made it through it because I could complain to Sarah like approximately every 2 pages or something, so... Not my thing. I gave it 1 star. I don't give books 1 stars unless they're really, really bad, so there's that. Not a recommendation from me. Sorry. Let's continue with this one. I'd say that's my classic read of the month, and it is Maurice by E.M. Forster. I heard about this book a while before I actually picked it up, and I heard that it was very influential and also very groundbreaking gay literature because it's very explicitly gay. Having read it, yes it is. There's no way to metaphorically talk about the love life of Maurice. He is gay. He's very much gay. He is a homosexual. There's a line, I think it said something like, you know, I'm one of those was it desirables or unspeakables? Like Oscar Wilde, and I was like, alright. There we go. It made me cry. The book itself, not so much, even though there were a lot of scenes that really hit very deep. There's this whole paragraph, for example, where Maurice basically says, as a gay man, you cannot reconcile yourself with Christianity because the church's teachings don't allow it. And I was like, thanks. But the reason that I teared up reading this is because there is an author's note attached to it, and what you have to know, I think I said this in my TBR video of August as well, what you have to know for this book is that Maurice was originally written, I believe, in 1913, something along those lines. It was published in 1971, 1 year after the author's death. And from what I knew before going into this, it was because the author was afraid that he couldn't publish an explicitly queer story like this. It was actually a lot more heartbreaking than that. The reason he was very sure and was afraid of publishing this and didn't want to publish it, you know, first of all, fear of persecution, obviously, was because he gave them a happy ending. and he knew that that alone was a crime at the time that he was writing it. The author's note is from 1960. 1969 is when the laws against homosexuals in the UK got, like, loosened a bit, I suppose. And 1970 is when he died, and 1971 is when Maurice was posthumously published. And the author's note of how he was so adamant on giving these two queer characters, these two gay men, a happy ending, because he was like, at least in fiction, I want them to have the forever and ever that fiction can offer them. It broke my heart. I was on the bus reading this. I cried on the bus because that author's note just broke my heart. So, Maurice itself, like the story itself, is very, very messy, so don't go into this expecting any kind of, like, clear experiences. There's a lot of internalized homophobia from a lot of characters. We obviously see it mostly from Maurice, who even goes to a hypnotist to try and get himself fixed, for example. There's also, like, somewhat dubious relationships. It's overall, it's a very messy gay book, but I personally think it's incredibly important for what it accomplished, and it's incredibly important to keep reminding ourselves that the author of Maurice was afraid of publishing this book in 1960. 1960! Because it had a happy ending. And I feel like the reason this is so important is because it reminds us that, at least for queer people, happiness is radical in some way, because that's what people keep trying to take away from us, and that's what they try to take away from us so much for such a long time. And we're slowly getting to a point where we have a smidgen of what we want and what we deserve. And I feel like Maurice, especially that author's note, just puts that into not exactly a whole different perspective, but it just makes you reappreciate that. It also hurts. So, you know, be careful going into this, but I do still highly recommend it. It was really good, and if you can read it, read the author's note too, because I personally think the author's note is incredibly important to this book, and specifically to its history of publication. Right, that was very sad. We're gonna move on to something a lot happier. Well, is the book happier? Not really, but you know, it's fine. It's a reread. I reread. It's such a good book. I'm so excited. I reread She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan to prepare for the publication of He Who Drowned the World, which came out on the 22nd, I believe. I have my edition. He's matching with this one. He's so stunning. He's so beautiful. I'm so excited to get into it. I'm so excited to see my favorite horrible characters again. She Who Became the Sun is a Chinese, like, historical fantastical story in a way. It's not necessarily telling, like, a very, like, specific historical story, but there's a lot of historical figures, and our main character, Zhu Chongba, is also the stand-in for a historical figure, and we basically talk about Zhu, or, well, used to be called just a girl, who takes over the fate of her brother because he's supposed to have a great fate and she's supposed to be nothing, and she refuses to be nothing, and so she takes over his fate of becoming a great person, or I think the prophecy even says the greatest. The writing is phenomenal. The characters are phenomenal. The way that gender specifically is treated in this book is so incredibly interesting from a queer perspective, from a social perspective. It's chef's kiss. The characters, as I said, they're fantastic. They're also, like, all of them are kind of sad. It's beautiful. I'm so excited for the second book. I really want to film a review, either for this book, like for both books, like separately, or for the entire duology once I'm done with it. So that will be coming in the future because I love this book so much. 5 stars. Five stars, what can I say? The reread was exactly as good as the first time reading it. No notes. Thank you very much. And last, but certainly not least, because this was another automatic 5 star, and I'm very happy that it, you know, it just continued to just be absolutely amazing. We have The Lias Knot by M.A. Carrick. This is the second book in the Rook and Rose trilogy, which has also been completed as of this month, as of the month of August. I'm so excited to be reading book 3. This is a alternative fantastical history series, I suppose. It's set in what is basically a fantastical version of Venice, and there's a lot of conflict going on there with different people, with different people from different ethnicities, different backgrounds, and we started following mostly Ren, who is a con artist and who is trying to basically smuggle her way into one of the noble houses of Nadezhda, which is the city that all of this takes place in, under the name of Renata. I don't really want to say a lot more about The Lias Knot because it would spoil you for the first book, which is called The Mask of Mirrors. Suffice it to say, please pick this up. If you like incredible character work and incredible characterizations, incredible relationships between those characters, if you're interested at all in a really rich and deep and layered world building that is nonetheless presented to you in the most unassuming way possible, it's a form of art. M.A. Carrick have truly perfected when to tell you what kind of information and how to present it to you so you don't feel like you're getting a history lesson from just one person who shouldn't be giving history lessons in the first place. There's a lot of different perspectives in this book, which is also really nice, because you get to see a lot of characters from various different perspectives. Do yourself a favor, pick this series up. It's also done. It's a trilogy. It's over. You know, it's not one of those series that could go on forever and ever. We have 3 books and that's it. Do it! And if you at all feel interested in picking this book up, if you feel interested in picking the series up, we're still doing a readathon on Sarah's Discord of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, which is her book club, where we all read books by like high fantasy books, adult high fantasy books, written by women or genderqueer people. We're now going to be reading book 3 in September, but the channels are still open. It's a really nice community. I love it there, and you get to catch up with everyone regarding your theories, because you might have a lot of theories. Or you might be like me and just head empty go along with the adventure. Both things actually work. So, you know, just 5 stars. 5 stars. I don't know what else to say. I really love this series. Right, so as you can see, I had some very not so great experiences and some really amazing experiences, so honestly I would count this month as a win, and I will just be forgetting about Fourth Wing, hopefully soon. I hope that you also had a nice reading month in August. Let me know some of your favorite books versus some of your least favorite books in the comments. I'm intrigued to see what happened to you there, like, because it's just so interesting to see what books people like and don't like and why they liked or didn't like them. So feel free to leave those in the comments down below. I will be leaving Sarah's Discord server, like the link to her Discord server, in the description down below, so again, if you want to join us, please feel free. It's a really lovely community up there. And as always, I hope that you have a nice reading experience and that you continue having a nice reading experience, and I will see you soon.